Hello and welcome everyone to tonight's webinar, bringing back Erasmus Plus, a winnable campaign, ? So before I introduce our panel, Julius and I are just going to say a few words. And so I'm Tamsin Shasha, I'm Vice Chair of Grassroots for Europe. And welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Erasmus Plus Alliance. It's the name of our campaign group. And this webinar, as you know, is run by Grassroots for Europe and is aimed at the whole grassroots pro-EU movement, but we're open to all. This is our campaign group, all ages, all backgrounds, all walks of life. And our alliance sets the example, at least on age. We cover all age groups. Howell Jones first sparked the idea of a united campaign group. Howell was the architect of the Erasmus programme in the European Commission back in 1987. So Erasmus was the brainchild of a Brit. Our founder members are Jennifer Monaghan and Caroline Kuipers, both of whom they want me to tell you are grannies, but very energetic grannies. At the opposite end of the page, the range, one of our key partners is YEM, the Young European Movement, who I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And Julius Leuter is here. He is the president of YEM, and he is our co-presenter for this evening. Over to you, Julius.
Thanks a lot, Tamsin, and welcome everyone, and thanks for coming. Indeed, our movement is run by and for young people from the age that you feel like you want to have a say and speak about youth issues, which can be any age, really. Ranges from around 15, 16 on until the age of 35. Which is where we have a clear cutoff, unfortunately. But this gives a lot of space for many people in our organization. Many of our members, obviously, are exactly those who are now missing out on the enormous opportunities offered by the Erasmus program. You may have spotted that the acronym for the Erasmus Plus Alliance is EPA, which is funnily the same as the US Environmental Protection Agency. And that's a very happy coincidence because Erasmus Plus has this year almost doubled its funding for its exchange programs. And there was a huge priority on the environment and everything that is to do with sustainable development, which is something that we can all be very happy about, but something that especially young people can be very happy about, because you might have noticed that young people are very active about the sustainability cause and the climate struggle. Another sort of big chunk of the funding is also devoted to inclusion, to give access to the most disadvantaged and the most marginalized in society. So this could be, for example, ethnic or cultural minorities, people with disabilities, people with a migratory background, and so on and so forth. And finally, a third priority of this new funding program, which the European Commission has announced, is the digital revolution. And unfortunately, Britain is now shut out from these international exchanges and opportunities under all of those three key headings, as well as the many others that still exist, but obviously I can't highlight them all. The Young European Movement UK, we have seen many of our members go abroad with obviously university exchanges. As a matter of fact, I've just come back from one. I've just finished a year in France as an Erasmus exchange student. And those are university exchanges were the original focus of Erasmus throughout decades. But when it consolidated a number of other streams under the plus heading, which is really key and which we're going to talk about today as well, which was 7 years ago, we were also beginning to take advantage of a lot of Erasmus funding for youth work and youth exchanges in particular. This is about making young Europeans meet from all corners of the continent. And this is something that's really important to develop this sense of being a young European and living that life as young European. And not only because of Brexit, not only because of COVID, but also because of the loss of Erasmus. This has become much, much more difficult, which is a shame. YEM is obviously mainly involved with university exchanges that were the original focus of Erasmus, but we have indeed also profited from funding in other areas. And many of our members have done a number of projects And across the continent, all of our partner sections also, they live kind of on the basis of this program. So everything that we do in other parts of continental Europe is really thanks to this program. And this is also what made me the pro-European that I am today, is exactly those Erasmus-funded youth exchanges and conferences that I was able to travel to. So this is why this is a personal loss, and which is why I'm first of all sad to see it go, but also very happy to see such a huge amount of interest in the UK of keeping it going and bringing it back. Tamsin.
So the plus is the bit that no one's heard of, as Julius was just mentioning. It's a unique and universal route to levelling up, which is a term that we've heard a lot of lately. The plus covers a comprehensive range of international exchanges for all those who need skills training, an area the UK is notoriously weak in. It bolsters apprenticeships with practical overseas experience. It offers key internships for tutors, teachers, and trainers to share international best practice. Crucially, it includes young people who leave school with no chance at all of going to training college, still less university. Another of the key partners in our alliance is SIL, the Centre for International Learning and Leadership, and I'm delighted to introduce Andrew Hadley. SIL has a wide experience on the administration of the Plus programs, and he is one of our members of our Erasmus Plus Alliance. Do you just want to say a few words, Andrew, just to fill in the picture of the Plus side?
Thank you very much. Just to say that I will be here to answer questions or to contribute later on, but I'm not actually speaking. SIL is supporting this campaign. We are not leading it. Our focus is more on the practical response of what people can do in the absence of Erasmus Plus, and what is possible at different levels in the future to maintain the partnerships and opportunities that Erasmus Plus afforded. But obviously we deplore the decision to leave the program. We think it's very negative. I think it's based on a great deal of misinformation. And one of the things we're trying to do is to correct that, particularly with the focus on the Plus, who it's for. It's not just about university students, though that's very important. The value that it adds, both socially, culturally, and economically, and also its massive importance to the future of the UK as an international country. And if global Britain means anything, then it must mean opportunities for young people. Thanks. Thank you,
Andrew. Julius, did you want to say a few words? Introduce our speakers.
Our speakers today have all been deeply involved with the Erasmus Plus. We have Julie Ward and Jackie Jones.
Well, Jackie Jones is not actually here right now, I don't think, but carry on.
That's unfortunate. As MEP, member of the European Parliament, and as education.
And Anna Grainger, we shall come to later, because Anna is modern language teacher, co-founder of Coventry City of Languages and coordinator of Coventry MFL Hub. And she's an former e-twinning ambassador. Just wanted to get that in.
Carry on, Tamsin. I might have not been sort of updated on the recent changes there. Maybe you want to take that on?
No worries. I'm just so like all of us, our speakers want the current and future generations of young people in our country to have the opportunities we had, hence our message, bring back Erasmus Plus. What people don't know is losing Erasmus Plus was not an automatic result of Brexit. It needn't have happened. Many countries outside the EU can and do join in. 6 as full participants, 168 as partners in one or more Erasmus Plus exchanges. So why did the government choose to abandon such a tried and tested global program and replace it with a program that is much cheaper and which in addition is funded for only 1 year? Our keynote speaker today is Andrew Adonis, chair of the European Movement, and I'm sure he'll be able to give us some clues as to the answer to that question. Andrew, we welcome your advice on how best we can set about winning our campaign. Over to you.
Thanks, Tamsin. Huge congratulations to everybody involved in the Erasmus Plus Alliance, and thanks for sparing time this evening. And it's great to see 80 people on this call, so it's clearly a big and live issue. And it's also great to have such distinguished company as well. As Tamsin said, this was a British, or maybe I should say Welsh created scheme originally. And I'm really interested in the question by Anthony Smallwood, who has played a distinguished part in Erasmus more recently, in the chat. And that might be a good place to start. He says he never imagined that they would dream of withdrawing because they said in their manifesto, Boris Johnson said in his manifesto he would stay. Does that surprise me? Did I think that he might therefore withdraw? I'm afraid yes, because the best guide to what Boris Johnson is going to do at any given time is that at some point in the recent past, he said the opposite. Remember, the manifesto also committed the government to maintaining the 0.7% commitment to international aid. He said we were proudly committed, he said, proudly committed to it. And that's now been decimated since. So Erasmus is in the same camp. It's anything that's international. Basically, unless it involves something completely new that he can take credit for, Boris Johnson isn't much interested in existing international commitments. And in particular, he wants things that are cheaper than what went before, because he doesn't really believe, he doesn't have an altruistic attitude to international engagement, even on behalf of his own people, which of course Erasmus does, let alone when it's international aid. And therefore it doesn't surprise me that he's done what he did. And of course, the Turing scheme both enables him to do it more cheaply and also to claim he's doing something well beyond Europe. And as we saw with the Australia trade deal announced today, everything which engages with the wider world beyond Europe, providing it's not international aid to the developing world, is a good thing. Anything that involves partnership with our European neighbours is almost intrinsically bad at the moment. So we do live in Alice in Wonderland world at the moment. It's not completely Alice in Wonderland. It is driven by polls. If you look at the Dominic Cummings WhatsApp messages exchange with Boris Johnson today, which are an absolutely extraordinary revelation of how the country is run. What's interesting about it is that whenever Boris isn't clear what to do, he asks Dominic Cummings what the polling shows. He's very, very polls driven, where he sees public opinion. That, of course, is the reason why he did Brexit. He thought that's where the majority would come out. It was never because he believed in it. Remember, he wrote 2 articles arguing different sides of the case in 2016. He did Brexit because he thought it was his route to power, both within the Conservative Party, and it would prove more popular. That's the reason why he's cut international aid. In the Red Wall, indeed, public opinion polls at large show that it's popular. And I think in terms of, handouts to a very small number of students to study in these elite European universities, which is how he's portraying Erasmus, isn't unpopular. So it doesn't surprise me that he's done it. I don't think he'll change his mind at all. I don't think that our campaign will lead to the government changing its mind and joining Erasmus Plus. But I do think that the campaign is very, very worthwhile for 2 big reasons. The first is it might get a better deal in terms of European students coming here and British students going to Europe within the Turing scheme. It's possible that will happen, and you never quite know what causes these things. It may be partly due to our campaigning. But secondly, we have a massively wider interest in making the argument as to why his trade and cooperation agreement and all of the associated measures, like withdrawing from Erasmus Plus, are bad things. If we can get that argument firmly established in the middle ground, then it may be that we can bring about a fundamental change in policy before too long, maybe under the next Conservative leader, maybe with a change of government. And one of the things we clearly want to be a part of that is high quality, high level and high volume student exchanges, a la Erasmus, and the wider plus to that too. So I'm being completely frank with you. I don't think that by campaigning massively, we're going to get Boris Johnson to be signing up to Erasmus Plus soon, but I do think that it may have short-term benefits in terms of better terms for students, both our students on the continent and continental students coming here, and it may contribute to a fundamental renegotiation of which one part will be bringing back something like Erasmus Plus. The other thing I'm very keen to explore this evening, which I think is important, is what I have in my mind is the Welsh scheme, which I was so keen to hear from Jackie, if she joins us. Because as part of the manifesto for the recent Welsh Senate and government elections that have just taken place, the Labour Party, and I think the Greens as well, actually, I think probably Plaid, I think maybe the Nationalists as well, committed to creating a scheme that would have many of the attributes of the Erasmus scheme in respect of Welsh students studying in continental universities and vice versa. And this is being done, as I understand it, but it'd be great to have it explained to us properly, by means of the Welsh Government, which has statutory powers to fund universities and students without needing to go through the UK government in London, choosing to fund a scheme that has many of the attributes of the Erasmus scheme in it. Now, I think that's an excellent idea. And when I properly understand the scheme and see how it's going, I think it may be that we, the Erasmus Plus Alliance, collectively, could start approaching in a systematic way the other bits of subnational government in the United Kingdom who are going to be positive about this, to see whether they might adopt a similar scheme. I'm thinking in particular of the Mayor of London, the Scottish Government, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, the Northern Ireland Assembly. You know, actually a large part of the UK, maybe as much as half if you add it all up, is controlled by parties that are strongly pro-European and in principle in favour of Erasmus. So I'm very keen, if we can't do it this evening because we don't have Jackie with us, maybe there'll be somebody else who can help us in the discussion, but I'm very keen that we should learn properly how this proposed Welsh scheme is going to work and see whether we could act, the Erasmus Plus Alliance, could act as kind of ambassadors for the scheme, both with public opinion, but also I'm very happy with colleagues in this meeting this evening, you, Tamsin, and Julius and others, actually to arrange meetings with Sadiq Khan, Andy Burnham, Nicola Sturgeon, to discuss whether it might be possible to have similar schemes established in their jurisdictions. But I'm really keen to hear your views. And as I say, it's great that we've got this meeting this evening, because I think this needs to be the beginning of a really intensive campaign.
Thank you, Andrew. I think it was, made some very, very good points there. I think it was Dominic Grieve who said on an Erasmus webinar that was on recently that Erasmus Plus was the lowest hanging fruit, possibly of all the things that we've lost because of Brexit. And I'm just wondering if the way forward is almost to shame the government, but we really need the voices of Erasmus alumni. And I'm delighted to say that we have some here today. Two people, we'll be talking to them, bringing them in, Nadia and Nathan, later on. But I think that might be one way that we can do it. I'm going to hand over to Julius now, as I know he's chomping at the bit.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot, Andrew, for this real spot-on political analysis. And it's really devastating to hear this, how politics is being conducted. And this is again why I can sort of appeal to all those under 35 here in this Zoom call. If you feel like you want to get active about one of these causes, then please join us and get in touch with us and volunteer with us, because this is exactly what we are against, politics that just follows the polling. However, I also want to make a different point before I hand over to our next speaker, which is that I think we can change the polling if we manage to speak to the population, if we manage to make clear how rich the Erasmus program is, then no sane person would frankly be against opportunities. So this is something that we have to debunk. And this debunking mission against, this is not only elite people, this is not only elite universities, this is not only universities in the first place. These are points that we really have to get across, and we need your help in getting the word out. But let's hand over to our next speaker. It's Julie Ward, who was a Labour MEP for North West England until the UK left the EU, as you know, at the end of 2020. And Julie launched a campaign group which is called Left Against Brexit, and she worked with deprived communities in the Northeast before her election to the European Parliament, which was in 2014. I'd like to hand over to you now, Julie.
Thank you very much. Well, I became an MEP really because of the forerunner of Erasmus Plus. So I'm really a theatre maker, a writer, somebody who used culture as a tool for social change in informal education. And my artists cooperative became the partner in a peace school in Germany, in the Harz Mountains, located in a conference kind of campus run by the Sonnenberg Foundation. And the Sonnenberg Foundation was set up by the Germans as reparations for the things they did to the Danes during the Second World War, and then of course decided they needed to say sorry to everybody. The point is that I used to take young people from my very deprived community in the former Durham coal mining area, which is where I've come back to live. And these were young people who'd never been to Newcastle, never been to London. But I would take them to this project for 2 weeks, where they would engage with their peers from right across Europe, not just from EU countries, but I remember there being young people from Russia and Ukraine there, young people from Palestine and Israel being there. Not everybody could speak English, but they shared each other's culture, food, dances, music, traditions for 2 weeks in each other's company, making lifelong friends with each other. And certainly when those young people were on those long train journeys back up here to County Durham, they cried all the way because they had made deep, deep emotional connections with other young people and discovered actually that they all have shared aims, ambitions, values. And for me, that story is really important. I tell that story in the very first speech I ever made as an MEP when I was in the Committee for Culture and Education, and I was defending the Erasmus program against UKIP, who called it propaganda, yeah? Propaganda was always their word for things that were pro-European, embracing European values of freedom and democracy, mutual respect, gender equality. And it was because of the horrendous lies about the EU that were in the right-wing press that I decided to even put my name down for selection as a Labour MEP, because I wanted to defend the Europe that I had encountered, a Europe of peace, a Europe of democracy, a Europe of shared values, a Europe of intercultural dialogue and people-to-people contact. So being on the Culture and Education Committee for 6.5 years and being the vice chair in my second mandate meant that I was very closely connected to the writing of the current iteration of Erasmus Plus, which has got an increased budget and is even more broad-based than the scheme that my young people took part in. So what happened is that there was a diverse range of programs which were for teachers, for young people from deprived communities, which was the youth program, if you like. Teachers for informal educators like me. I did several programs that were under what was called Grundtvig. And Erasmus Plus basically brings all those programs together under one heading, which is Erasmus with the plus on the end. And I think it's very, very important that we keep talking about the plus bit, okay? Because the government are saying they want to level up. They are saying they want to make sure that the left behind communities where I live and where all these young people come from, now are going to have resources and opportunities. Well, they had them all under Erasmus Plus. And so my story is a story of the kind of program before it became the complete program. But I want to tell two little stories about two extraordinary experiences. So I represented the northwest of England. There is a school for autistic children in Stockport. I met these children in Brussels because they were part of an Erasmus Plus program, and they came out to Brussels to meet other young people with autism to participate in a project together. I then visited them in their school in Stockport, and those young people were doing work experience. They were doing entrepreneurial activities in their school. They held a discussion and a debate with me where they asked more searching questions about the EU and Brexit and all the rest of it than anybody else in any debate I had ever participated in. They were looking at getting jobs, and I'm talking about kids with autism. And it's Erasmus that gave them that. And it gave them a belief in themselves. It gave them a sense of their own dignity. I also know I have a very good friend who runs an amazing organisation in Northumberland, in Blythe, Northumberland, you know, a very deprived coal mining community. And this organisation is for people with learning disabilities. They have done more Erasmus Plus programs than anybody else I know. They are people with learning disabilities, and through Erasmus Plus, they discovered a position for themselves within society that was not really achievable in their own small community in Blythe. And they are still in touch with other communities like themselves who are working using arts, culture, informal education, a whole range of different activities. They have shared best practice. They have come together to do festivals and projects with people like themselves. And they've been doing these projects when perhaps other people who are less challenged haven't taken up these opportunities. And I cannot see how any replacement that the government is going to put in will ever give those deprived young people back what they had under Erasmus Plus. So for me, it's a piece, it demonstrates the fundamental core of what the EU is, which is about a peace project. It also is completely inclusive. It's about lifelong learning. It's about culture, education, training, youth and sport. And it's not just for EU countries. There are many non-EU countries who are key partners. And there is also Erasmus Plus for Africa. So, you know, globally, we could still be having all these relationships with all these countries under the program that we were actually part of in the first place. And if I can just answer as to one reason why I think Boris Johnson and the right-wing Tories, who are cheerleading Brexit continually, don't want us to be part of it, is because if you are part of any European program, the added value is embracing European values. And they don't want any truck with that. And I read today that they even want to take us back to the imperial measures. They don't even want metric measures anymore. So anything that will embrace European values, which of course we all want to embrace because they're decent, common sense values. And I'm sure the Turing scheme, you know, if Alan Turing was still alive, he'd probably, you know, be cheerleading for European values, because they're the kind of things that we should all want in a decent society in the 21st century. Now, I don't know much about the Welsh scheme, but we just need to acknowledge here that that young people in Northern Ireland are still in the scheme, okay? So young people and institutions in Northern Ireland are still in the scheme. And maybe, sorry, just one last word, but all those young people that I took on those programs every year, I'm still in touch with them, and they are now leaders in their communities. They went to university for the first time in their life. They've set up businesses. They're running amazing projects. They are volunteers in their communities. And many of those young people would have been the young people who wouldn't have found jobs, who would have maybe engaged in antisocial behaviour, who would be economically inactive. But it's Erasmus Plus that made them the successes that they are.
Thank you very much, Julie. It's Erasmus Plus that made them the successful. What was the last phrase? I really liked that. Thank you so much for that very impassioned speech. I think this is the sort of narrative that we really need to be getting out there. And just to let you know that we don't have Jackie Jones tonight, but I'm not sure for what reason, but we will have her on July the 14th when we are doing another webinar called Life Without Erasmus Plus. This is responses from the 4 nations of the UK and potential ways forward. And that webinar is hosted by CIL, the Centre for International Learning and Leadership, and Actors of Dionysus, my own company. So that's another one which I'll put in the chat. I'm going to move swiftly on because we do have a lot to get through, and we haven't heard from Anna, who I know will be equally passionate on the subject of Erasmus Plus. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks very much, Tamsin. Thank you. eTwinning. eTwinning is a network of almost 1 million teachers and is designed for children aged 3 to 19 to take part in projects within their own classroom via a secure platform. So we as teachers know that every teacher who's registered on eTwinning is who they say they are. So all schools are vetted. It's fully inclusive, so it doesn't matter what kind of school you're in, whether it's a nursery, a special school, a pupil referral unit, mainstream, anybody can take part in it. It also covers teacher professional development, particularly for digital learning and collaboration. And there are 44 countries across Europe and beyond who take part in it. And some of those countries are not in the EU, so some of the newest members to have joined are Georgia, Lebanon, Jordan, and others as well. Schools can get recognition for their work, which is always something schools are after and great for Ofsted. And it's also fully compatible with the curriculum. So you can design your project around your curriculum. So one of the saddest days of my life was the 11 o'clock on the 31st of December, when I looked at the eTwinning site, sort of kind of knowing what was going to happen, but hoping it wouldn't. And if you do go to etwinning.net and have a little look, the UK is now greyed out. You can sort of see just how isolated we have actually become in Europe. It's really sort of visual there. So Turing. Turing funds mobility, and you can't take 3-year-olds on exchange trips. I've done projects in the classroom with 3, 4, 5-year-olds, and that is no longer accessible to us sort of via an easy route. There's no reciprocity, there is no teacher professional development, which is something that Ofsted, particularly for language teachers, have actually highlighted very, very recently in the last couple of weeks, and said how important it is for teachers to be able to travel abroad in order to improve their language, to keep their language up, and also for non-specialist teachers, particularly in primary, to actually gain those language skills. And that used to be available quite widely via the Key Action 1 part of Erasmus Plus, but that is no longer there. There are no classroom-based projects in Turing. Schools have pretty much been left with next to nothing. And the government claimed that it would actually cost £2 billion to stay in Erasmus Plus. So Turing having 100 million thrown at it, effectively the education budget has been cut by £1.9 billion. And we're— Can
I just ask somebody who's not muted? Maybe there's some noise, there's some background noise. Sorry, to mute.
Is that okay? So we're certainly not going to see that saving in school, and schools certainly cannot fund the professional development and all those other things that we've lost from it. So why is it so important for schools? It really helps to break down barriers. I work in a school in Coventry, which is quite a deprived, well, very deprived area, actually, one of the most deprived areas in Coventry. We have children who have quite low aspirations. Many have never been out of their local area. They've got a bit of a fear of foreigners. It's really helped. It's really changed the work that I do, helped to break down barriers. It's helped children to understand other cultures, challenge stereotypes. And it's also brought purpose to the curriculum, which I think sometimes can be a little bit dry. Children can't actually see how that can be applied outside of their own classroom. And it was so good in order to be able to do that. And also on a wider scale, the British Academy wrote a report a couple of years ago saying that the lack of language skills costs the UK economy £48 billion a year. Now, I'm certainly not saying that e-twinning was only for languages, because it wasn't. But that's what they sort of estimated. It costs that amount of money. And without Erasmus Plus for schools, it becomes so much more difficult in order to get that experience for children to practice their languages. We've got to inspire children from a young age. We've got to get them in school, because once they get to 18, it's too late. You know, if they haven't got that passion for languages, for international collaboration, for travel, by the time they're 18, they're certainly not going to be applying for Turing funding. And dare I say it, young people with aspirations are actually going to cost the economy quite dearly when they're older. They're going to become one of those statistics if we haven't given them that sort of that passion and those aspirations to see the world, to make a difference, and things like that. So that's e-twinning really in a nutshell. And it's such a big passion for me, because it really has changed the way that I teach in my school, and the children became so much more alive with it and so much more interested in their learning. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Anna. Julius, I'm just going to read something, actually. This is a recent survey that was conducted in Scotland, found Erasmus Plus investment in youth gave spectacular value for money. For every £1 put into an exchange, 816 saved in expenditure on care, probation, prison, mental health. So yeah, what you were saying there about value for money, it's really true. We don't have Jackie Jones, but we do have Geraint Taufan-Davis, who is going to speak a word. He may be able to answer your question, Andrew. So you might want to speak to each other. But Geraint, tell us a bit about yourself. Geraint, you're muted. And also, if we could speak, as we've got a lot of questions, I'm sure people are queuing up to question, and I do also want to bring Nadia and Nathan in. So, yeah.
I will try and keep it very short. I'm sorry that Jackie isn't here, but if she does come, I'm sure she will add something. I'll just give you a very, very brief overview of the, if you like, the Welsh equivalent of Erasmus that goes under the less than sexy title of the International Learning Exchange Program. I mean, it says what it does, you know, on the tin, as it were. But essentially, the Welsh government announced this last year, and it's a program that will run from 2022 to 2026, and the Welsh government is putting up 65 million to do that. And if you take the 65 million, if you remember that Wales is 5% of the British population, multiply that 65 million by 20, it gets you to, you know, what would be 1.35 billion, I think, you know, if it was a UK-wide program. I think the important difference between the Welsh scheme and the Turing scheme is reciprocity, in that students will actually go in both directions. And I think the plan is that over the first 4 years, some 15,000 will go out from Wales to different parts of Europe, and about 10,000 will come into Wales from other parts of Europe. And that is a very, very substantial number, you know, for a part of the UK that is actually a population of only 3 million. I think the other thing that is worth mentioning is that when it was announced, it was said that they wanted the main beneficiaries of the scheme to be in the upper secondary level. They want the scheme to include the vocational side, adult education, you know, youth training, and so on. So it's got the same breadth as Erasmus Plus, I think, in its intentions. The Welsh government, I think, has done something quite spectacular. I mean, given the size of its overall budget, given the fact that, frankly, it doesn't enjoy the same, although it gets Barnett formula funding, you know, Scotland and Northern Ireland have done rather better out of Barnett than Wales has done. So I think the Welsh government has done quite a thing in putting up this amount of money behind this scheme. And I think it was part of an international strategy that was set out before the last Senate elections by Lynette Morgan, who was then at the time, the Minister for International Affairs, and of course had been a former member of the European Parliament. So there is a very, very strong commitment to this international side and to European engagement right across the three of the four parties in the Senate, that is Labour, Plaid Cymru and the Lib Dems. Of course, when this program was announced, the Education Minister was Kirsty Williams, who was a Lib Dem, a member of Parliament herself. And you actually have within the last Plaid Cymru manifesto, you had a commitment to support this international program. And I think the Plaid Cymru manifesto went on to say they wanted to align it as closely as possible to Erasmus Plus. So it's worth mentioning that. And of course, it's worth mentioning, I think, that it will be an option for universities in Wales to use this international learning exchange program and to use the Turing program of the UK government. So it doesn't, you know, in a way you could use both. The scheme is going to be administered on behalf of all the Welsh universities through Cardiff University. They're setting up an executive that embraces the other universities, but it will be run from Cardiff University. So that is the scheme in short.
Okay, thank you, Geraint. Andrew, did you want to ask Geraint anything at all on that subject?
I just want to say it's a really, really clear and helpful description. And I suppose the task for us as an alliance is to work out how we can take the best bits of the Welsh scheme and propose that they be grafted onto Turing, because of course, given that we've got the Turing scheme and that is there, how you could put the two together by a mix of subnational governments, where outside Wales, and the Turing scheme, I think is something we should seek to do.
I think it's worth saying that you know, I would imagine that the Turing scheme itself is going to develop. I mean, it got this sort of first year funding, and it seemed to me that when the scheme was announced, the government hadn't really thought through the details of it. So I would imagine over the next year or two, it could begin to mutate into something slightly different.
Thank you, Geraint. I just noticed that Anna's put a e-twinning petition in the chat. Please do look at that, everyone, and sign it. Are we going to bring in our Erasmus alumni now? But I'm going to hand over to Julius. Geraint, can you mute? And Andrew, I think. Oh, go on. Sorry. Julius.
Yeah, that's always handy. Otherwise, we have interference. Yeah, we heard a lot about Erasmus from the side of people who have administered, run, organized the program. Obviously, the real test of any program is the people who actually take advantage of this. So if you don't believe us, we are now going to be joined by people who actually went on those mobility experiences. And this is, I think, also key when it comes to transporting our message to the wider public, because partly we're going to be speaking to the convinced here. We need to get the voices out of those people that really enjoyed those programs, because people don't like to listen to bureaucrats and administrators, but people who really took advantage themselves, which is why we are indeed very pleased to have two former Erasmus Plus trainees with us to give us their own experience. Nadia Musah and Nathan Hammer, both are members of Europeans UK, which is an organization, a network that is promoting international opportunities for young people. And that's also linked with SIL, which Andrew already mentioned before. Nadia, would you like to? If you can unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. It was quite funny because I was just scrolling, I was looking at the messages and I saw a message from, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, Naomi Donnellan.
Neve
Donnellan. And it says, our generation has let young people across the UK down so badly. One day they will hold us to account. And as a Erasmus Plus former volunteer, it's quite disappointing to know that the UK is dropping this scheme, because for me, coming out of university for my first degree, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I think a lot of young people, even after university or going to university before they go, they're still trying to find out where, what career path they want to take. And after I finished my degree, I remember I was at home and I was just researching different type of opportunities, and being somebody who's in love with just traveling, I came across the Erasmus Plus, but I learned it through Red Cross. And I signed up, and then I found that I was going to Germany, and I thought, oh no, I'm going to Germany, I can't speak the language. However, I was chosen, so I started my 1 year in Germany, and it has been transformational. Literally, it's changed every aspect of my life. I was able to work with the German Red Cross. I was able to meet so many different people that I wouldn't meet, on a normal day. I worked in an international kindergarten. I did volunteer coordination with Belgium, in Netherlands, training young people, meeting so many different passionate people. And I think for me, the main thing Erasmus Plus has been very important for me because of the financial side, because it was fully funded. And us young people, when we come out, we don't have the finances available to be able to travel and live in another country for 1 whole year. They covered everything. I had mentorship. They took care of us in the sense of if we had any issues or any problems, especially when it came down, that was my first time, leaving home and living in another country. And I learned so many things, and just meeting different people from different European countries and even outside of European countries, taking part in trainerships, seminars, short-term field trips. It's just been very transformational, and it's heavy that Erasmus Plus has been pushed to the side, because there are a lot of young people, especially during this whole COVID period, between the ages of 18 to 24, that there's no opportunities for them, because not everyone wants to go to university. Some people are in the youth club, some people are in secondary school and colleges, and Erasmus Plus is that gap, and it gives you that it gives you a lot of skills, because even when I went there, I couldn't speak a word of German, and then I left. I can't really say that I was fluent, but I was near enough intermediate. And even now, since COVID, I would go there, I would go back and work with like the former employees in the Red Cross every year. It was only, since COVID that I haven't gone. So for me, there's still that lifelong connection. And yeah, it's quite sad that, something like this, which is needed because a lot of young people, especially during this period of economic uncertainty, that it's been taken away from us. So yeah, Erasmus Plus it's been transformational for me in terms of my language, speaking of a language, in terms of, jobs as well, because that one also adds to your CV, because you have international experiences, you have lifelong skills, they're all transferable. So yeah, Erasmus Plus has been very beneficial to me, especially. And anytime I come across anyone, especially young people who don't know what they want to do, I would always say, try Erasmus Plus, because that will fund you, that will look after you, you have alumni that will keep in contact with you. But unfortunately, it's changed.
Thank you, Nadia. Well, we're working hard to bring it back, and the word I take away from that is transformational. Really, it's a very good word to describe it, the before and after. Nathan, please, let's hear from you.
No, thank you. Thanks everyone for organising this, attending, and thank you, Nadia, as well, for your just beautiful description of it. Unfortunately, I don't think I can match it with the same emotion, so I suppose I can't really try to go through all my own experiences. But to build upon there, something what really struck a chord with me was other schemes out there. Is there any? And if they are, there's always some sort of hidden cost behind it. It's not feasible for, say, a young person in my position who hasn't gone to university, who haven't got that financial backing from parents and people around me to be able to go and travel and live abroad for a year. But as you said, transformational. Erasmus Plus, it has completely changed my life. I've gone from a sort of aimless 19-year-old to now 2 years down the line, thinking about moving over into Europe, becoming an English teacher, to be with my partner who I met on a Erasmus Plus project. So I know it might sound a little bit cringy and maybe not something what you wouldn't like broadcast everywhere, but my point is that it does change lives. It's completely changed the trajectory, what I saw myself going on. And that wouldn't have been possible without it. And the past sort of 18 months has been a huge blow for me as well in my own career, because I was maybe looking towards a career in youth work or sort of international projects along those lines, hoping for one day to be able to be part of the Erasmus Plus programme. So now I'm sort of left stranded, if you like, looking out there for other opportunities. But as I've just mentioned, there's very, very few out there. And if they are, they're not accessible at all for the majority of the people in the UK. So I can only sort of completely agree with everything what Nadia said. I'm sorry I can't match it with the same emotion and energy as that, but it's definitely completely changed my life too. And yeah.
I feel completely heartbroken actually listening to your stories. So one of the things that our alliance wants to do is make a video recording Erasmus alumni voices, and we're working with Andrew from SIL on that. So we definitely want to have both of you guys please come back and be part of that video. So I don't know how you could listen to that narrative and not be moved by those stories, to be honest. I really find it, I feel incredibly angry listening to them for what we've lost and what the government didn't have really a right to take away, I think. We're going to go to questions. Trust me, I know it's been nearly an hour. There was a lot to get through and we have a lot of speakers. I just want to talk a little bit about our alliance. We obviously want to get Erasmus Plus back, but how do we set about it? With the current political makeup in Westminster and the existing voting system, nothing much will change unless we can win over backbench Tories. So this means winning over those who vote for them. And this has to be done on the ground at local level, which is why we need your support. In other words, by locally based groups like all of you guys in the pro-EU grassroots movement. We'll be trying to persuade people to bring back an international exchange program that most people, most don't know they've lost. So the first priority is to get out that information, and we need to fundraise. I want to take this opportunity to thank Best for Britain for supporting our Erasmus Plus campaign, and also to Grassroots for Europe. We are actively fundraising at the moment. We're looking for people to support us. We need a website, a Twitter account, money for flyers and publicity. We also have a really good social media campaign lined up, which Best for Britain and Grassroots for Europe are supporting, but we also need donations. So please do, at the end of this, think about supporting us. Any money raised from this webinar will go towards the Erasmus Plus campaign. Julius, final summing up before we take some questions, I think.
Yeah, we should really, but I think there is something important to say, especially with regards to volunteering and young people playing an active role in this, because I can say as sort of the representative of YEM on this panel, that the whole alliance and Grassroots for Europe and the individuals that you can see here on the screen have been super supportive of this and really want us young people to take the lead for this campaign. We just need you as volunteers to take it forward. So we have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of expertise. We have people who really, like Andrew, who worked their whole life in this domain and who really know how we can tackle it and who are really experts on the topic. What we need is you and your kind of passion and your drive to be getting it back. And that could be, for example, I'm just gonna check if you can still hear me. Yeah.
Yes, okay. You're fine, Julius. You're fine.
Okay, that's great. That's great. I hope my internet connection is fine. So what I was saying, we need your drive and your energy and your time also, and your commitment to join us in any of the many areas that we are going to get active in. So this could be, for example, social media communication. If you have skills with regards to editing pictures or videos, if you like to do Facebook postings, if you like to maybe also design a Facebook audience and maybe moderate Facebook discussion forums. But this can also be something more physical. This can be event organization. This can be running leafleting stalls, or maybe also organizing a flash mob at your university, or maybe in your company, or maybe at your school if you are even younger. So there is ample of opportunities that you could get active with, and our doors are more than open for you to join us. And even if you think that, you know, I'm not a political activist, I'm not a campaigner, I want to emphasize that none of us is born as a campaigner, and there is an enormous amount of things that you can learn on this journey with us. We are every day learning, designing this campaign from scratch. We are learning an enormous amount of things, and this is why I really want to extend the invitation to everyone here to join us on this, and also to maybe speak to your people that you know. Maybe speak to your children if they are in the age bracket, or speak to your grandchildren, and motivate them to join this, because this is really a historic moment. We have just lost this, and we are the first ones to be working on getting it back. And imagine if a couple of years ago, you can think back and you can say, actually, I joined this campaign and we actually made a move forward. So this is just an important note on that, and I'll also be putting in some links into the chat later on with some more information. And also just a quick heads up for all those in the chat or in this call who participated in those exchanges beforehand. If you get in touch with Hugo Mann to give your testimonial, I'd be grateful if you could also CC us as YEM. I'm going to put the email into the chat as well, so we can take that forward very swiftly, because we also have our own YEM channels where we like to push those voices and those experiences. Because as I said before, this is really key to win the public debate on this topic. Tamsin.
Thank you, Julius. Brilliantly said. There's other things we can help you with, you can help us with, suggested templates to MPs. It's worth writing to them, local authorities and businesses. One size won't fit all, so it's up to local groups to make adjustments to suit their area. So once we have our website up and running, we'll be able to kind of, you can contact us, and you can contact me at tamsin@grassrootsforeurope.org, and I'll put my emails information in the chat, so do contact me if you want to get involved in and volunteer in any capacity. I am going to now open up the questions. So the first one we have today, Richard, I don't know if you want to put Rhiannon on to ask this question. Is that possible? Here she is. Rhiannon, fire away.
Hello.
Hello. Good to have you with us.
No, the question, I thought that Andrew Adonis was going to answer it, but if anybody else can.
I'm sorry, he had to leave for another meeting, but...
Yes, that's okay. You know, I think you can learn a lot. I thought, well, what can you learn from the Welsh Government stance here? You know, what lessons can you take from it, what they have done?
So, Geraint, do you want to, Julie wants to say something.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say that I've been in touch with Jackie Jones, and she's actually really poorly. She had her vaccine earlier in the week and she's not been able to be here. So because she's a former colleague and friend of mine, I've just WhatsApped her and told her that we're all thinking of her, and she will be at the next webinar. And just to say something about, you know, I'm watching what the Welsh Government are doing, and they're doing lots of really interesting things. They're showing leadership in so many different areas. And one of the really interesting things that they're doing is they've got this Future Generations Commissioner, I believe, and a bill about future generations. Now, so this isn't just about one programme. This is really thinking about the next generation and trying to give back to them, you know, things that they need in what is going to be a very, very challenging environment in the future. So I think that there's a kind of whole approach, which is, you know, much more child and youth centred than what we've got in terms of the government thinking about English students and English young people.
Thank you, Julie. Geraint.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. And I think there are a lot of very good things going on. And I think the whole notion behind the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is that it actually sets out a kind of set of values against which all policies actually can be judged. And that is very good. But to come to the question that Rhiannon Barra asked about, what can other nations of the UK learn from the Welsh Government's replacement scheme? I think we have to remember that the Northern Ireland government is still in Erasmus. So if you're in Northern Ireland, you can actually still participate. One of the things that's intriguing me is why the Scottish government hasn't really followed the Welsh government's lead. Because I think that if you had a situation where Northern Ireland was in Erasmus and Wales and Scotland were both had sort of similar schemes of their own, on the lines of the Welsh government scheme, I think that would strengthen the arm of those people in England who are actually sort of, fighting for something similar for themselves. Because I'm quite a realist on this, that in terms of UK politics, it's often quite easy for a UK government to sort of be a bit dismissive of what the Welsh government does. It takes, to be honest, it takes more notice of what the Scottish government does. So I think trying to get the Scottish government on board on something similar to the Welsh scheme would be really valuable.
Well, we do have a Scottish representative on our next webinar, I believe. I'm going to find that out and put that in the chat when I can. Did anyone else want to say anything else on that subject? Thank you, Geraint. We're going to move on to the next question. Charlie Nelson. Are you there, Charlie? Do you want me to ask the question? I'm going to ask that question. Given the number of U-turns from this government and developments surrounding Northern Ireland, do you think it is possible to shame the government into rejoining Erasmus Plus? We have kind of touched on this. Did anyone want to? I think maybe Charlie's not there anymore, actually. Do we want to cover this? We kind of have a bit. Did anyone want to say anything? Did anyone want to say anything? Andrew?
I would just comment that I think a very simple argument is it right that Albanian, Armenian, German, Moroccan, and whatever other young people you want to name have access to all of these opportunities and British ones don't? And I think, come in. That is not in any way to underestimate the importance that those opportunities have for people in those countries, and they absolutely deserve those opportunities. But what about people in this country? It seems incredibly unfair.
And I would like to come in there because Andrew has obviously an experience.
Can I just say on that? I mean, when the protocol was being negotiated, my understanding is that it was open to the UK government to write Erasmus, into that agreement, and the EU was keen for us to do so, but it was specifically declined. So, I don't think this is not a money question. I think this is a question of ideology, and sad.
I would say ideology and ignorance, because I think the ignorance of the plus, the focus that this is only about privileged gap year students or university students is immensely damaging. And I totally agree with Julie that we must keep on and on informing people that levelling up, there's no better way of levelling up than giving these opportunities.
I think the elitist, the sort of the argument about Erasmus being elitist is a cover for the fact I think the government actually simply wants to dismantle as many European connections as it can.
Well, they want to dismantle the European Union, don't they, really? I think they would be happy for that not to exist at all, perhaps.
And we have to bear in mind one political aspect as well, which I just would like to highlight, which is that actually the UK government tried to stay within the Erasmus scheme, but they didn't want to partake in the whole period. And the EU said you can only partake in this scheme if you partake in the entire funding period, which is 7 years. And it has rumor that those 2 years would have been used to gently and professionally prepare a replacement program or ish replacement program like the Turing scheme, because you can't come up with this in a month's or half a year's time. And the EU kind of said, you know, we're not going to be the one supporting your own development in that sense, which was a strategic move, which can be criticized because obviously it's cutting young people off. But on the other hand, from our sort of campaign hat side of things, we can also say that the Turing scheme would maybe be better, and we would have fewer reasons to underline the importance of actually getting back into Erasmus, because the Turing scheme would be covering many of the things that the Turing scheme doesn't offer at the moment. And I'd also like to add another sort of more positive outlook, because Andrew was giving, Andrew Adonis before was giving kind of a pessimistic view on this. I think we do have an opportunity, first of all, with a change in public opinion and sort of making it more clear what Erasmus is actually which is what we are working on. I
think we're losing you a bit there, Julius. Your connection. Is it the connection? I think so, yes. Julie.
Well, I just,
you, Julius.
Just like to draw attention, please will everybody read the chat. Fergal keeps trying to clarify the situation regarding Northern Ireland's involvement, because it's not that Northern Ireland is in the programme, it's through, it's because universities and institutions within the Republic, within Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, are going to embrace young people to enable them to participate in the North. That's Julius.
Julius, can you mute?
Yeah. So people, and my response to that, well, it's another tricky fix, isn't it? You know, like the Northern Ireland Protocol, which now, you know, Johnson doesn't want to sort of uphold. Lots of things to do with Ireland are extremely complicated, and that means that, you know, it's a bit of a, you know, yes, it's generous from the EU side, but actually it's still not as it should be. And I'm not an expert on what's happened in Northern Ireland. It's extremely complicated. If I can just address that question about shaming the government, this government seemed to be ashamed of nothing. Boris Johnson.
They are immune to shaming, it's true.
Well, I always thought that when it was, when the court ruled that Boris Johnson had prorogued Parliament illegally, and that meant that he had lied to the Queen, I actually thought that British people, who I believe fundamentally are good people, who, you know, want to uphold rules and behave properly, and I really felt that British people don't like liars. I actually thought that Boris Johnson at that point would be completely, you know, dethroned, unmasked, and kicked out. And I think that the biggest problem that we've got is cutting through the mainstream media. The mainstream media, you know, are in hock with Johnson and his government, and it's very difficult cutting through any of that at all. And what they're doing is using COVID as a cover for any kind of criticism about anything, and burying all sorts of other issues and news. So I think we've got a bit of a problem. And I would say that what I have felt important personally is that I will continue being a truth teller. If people look back on my record as an MEP, as a campaigner, as a pro-European, as somebody who is an expert about international youth education programs, I will have been consistent throughout the time that I have been published or broadcast in the media about what I have been saying. And if you look at the government, what you do see is, you know, bumbling, incoherent responses in interviews. You do see U-turns, you see loads of spin. You see lots of lies. And that is just a hallmark of this horrendous government that we've ended up with. And one of the things that Erasmus does is actually use, it strengthens civic participation and democracy. And I don't think that this government is at all interested in educating a generation of young people who will question the way that they have behaved over these past few years. And actually, it's our job not only to try and get back into Erasmus or to make the touring scheme more equitable, we should also be concerned about educating the next generation so that Nadia, who raised an issue that had come up in the chat, your generation, right, can make your point when you go to the ballot box. That is where we get rid of this government and try and build back for future generations a much better society.
Julie, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you. I've just been rehearsing a play actually for the Brighton Fringe, which I've written, and it has a whole diatribe against Boris Johnson. It's supposed to be about Zeus, but it actually ends up being, you know, I think as theatre makers, as creative artists, it's our responsibility to reveal what's happening in this country. I'm just going to read you a small bit. A sluggish, thuggish, arrogant, privileged, racist, sexist, xenophobic, cringe-inducing, homophobic, vile, divisive, bigoted, gaslighting, rule-smashing, truth-twisting, manifesto-breaking, incompetent, unethical, shape-shifting, letterbox, pickaninny, watermelon sneering. There you go. And there's a bit more of it too. That's just a little bit of a performance. I'm doing that hanging upside down on a piece of thread as well. But anyway, that's enough about me. Let's go on to the next.
I will come in here quickly because I think one thing is important, and I'm speaking here on behalf of a political youth organization that, however, is not a political party. Because I think one thing is very key, and I very much sympathize with what Julie has been saying, and I'm sure many young people feel like this, and many people in the country generally. But I think if we speak about Erasmus, we also have to be careful not to alienate anyone who is not maybe 100% on board with the mission of the wider European movement, be this EM UK or Grassroots for Europe. And I think that the Erasmus topic itself is a very apolitical question that we can make many people excited about and make them join. If we manage to find the fine line between being political and criticizing Boris Johnson specifically, and criticizing an ideology that we are clearly against, and on the other hand, alienating people that maybe support Boris Johnson in certain ways, but still are against the cutting of opportunities. So I think this is what's going to be our challenge as a campaign. And I think this is really important to say here quite clearly also amongst supporters of the EU, obviously, and of the Erasmus scheme, indeed, that we have to win more than the ones that we have on board now. If we want to change the opinion, the public opinion in the country, the public opinion at the polling station that you mentioned, Julie, then we really have to win more, especially if it's about a niche topic like Erasmus. So this is why my take as Yem is a more careful one, or more tactful one, if you like, with regards to being very, very violent in our communication, because we might actually alienate people with that rhetoric. But I appreciate that you are a former politician, and I'm not a politician, and I'm not a youth politician either. I'm the president of the youth movement, which has political aims, but which is not going to stand for election anywhere.
Can I just quickly, I can make all the arguments, Julius, that need to be made. Economic, right? Soft power. Global Britain should be where we're going with this. And if we want global Britain, right? If Boris Johnson wants global Britain, you begin it by making a good relationship with reciprocity with your nearest neighbours. And you trade in ideas and common values, as well as fish and tins of meat. That for me, you know, we need to use the government's own words when we expose what they've done to us, right? What they've done to future generations. And I think that, you know, we've had lots of conversations and evidence and testimonies this evening about, I gave some, about how, you know, the economic impacts of Erasmus were to make sure that we had people who were skilled, who got transferable skills, who set up businesses, who contributed to the economy. Though that is us talking in the government's own language, right? And I can do that as well as speak the truth and defend Erasmus, and ultimately hope to expose, you know, Boris Johnson for the lying Prime Minister that he is.
Can I just come in, Tamsin?
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Thank you. I agree with you. I agree. Geraint.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly extraordinary that, you know, we've been at this issue for an hour and a half, and nobody's raised the issue of the standpoint of the universities. I think there is, and I saw it even in Wales before the Welsh government announced its own learning programme, that the universities were pretty silent because, frankly, they were afraid of action being taken by the UK government against the higher education sector. And I fear that there is similar silence in the universities in England at the minute. Now, you know, I maybe don't know enough. There may be things going on that I just don't know about, but I don't detect any great push from the universities. The universities got Horizon in the negotiation on the deal, and that was a really big thing for them. And they didn't really raise a protest when Erasmus was left out of it. And I think that's a real shame. And in part, there's also a problem, in part, when you discuss Erasmus. In the past, there's been a tendency to think that it was a scheme, you know, of exchange between university students. And it's taken quite a lot of effort to shift the focus, you know, onto the kind of non-university side of it. But I do think if you're going to win a campaign on Erasmus, if we haven't got the universities behind us, you know, I think that's, it beggars belief in it. It beggars belief in a way. So yeah. I wonder, how do we actually get into the governing councils of universities and actually start making the case, not necessarily through the papers from the outside, but actually within the governing councils of the universities?
Well, we do have, I think, people on our alliance who are connected to universities, and I've been thinking that myself, Geraint, so it's something that we have to explore further. I think it maybe is to do with punishment. In what way? I don't know, but Julie, did you want to say anything on that subject? We do have to move on to the next question. Do you want to hold that thought?
Well, I think there's a lot of really important comments in the chat on this. Yes, universities are very scared. They're actually very conservative organisations. They're very slow to change. And they're also now businesses. And many of them had already started looking further afield. Liverpool University has a relationship with a university in China. So one of the things that I think we should be doing, though, is pointing out some of the other things that are happening at EU level, which our universities won't be part of. So, for example, there is going to be a common education area. There are already a number of European university programs happening. And so our universities are going to be out of those also. I think that, you know, what would be really good, I mean, if Cardiff University is going to be leading the Welsh form of Erasmus, then we have a university in the UK that is already showing some leadership. And what we should do is build on that. And we should try and find some other universities and key figures within universities who are prepared to maybe form some kind of working group or alliance governments to look at how they can begin to shift some of the stick in the muds, you know, some of the scared people within the governing bodies.
So it's like a template for a path forward, really, is what you're in a way.
Well, I'm just thinking, so before I came onto this webinar, I was at a meeting with the Royal Society of Arts, of which I'm a fellow, and I was talking about a completely different campaign and project that I'm involved in to do with climate change and culture. And actually on that meeting, at that meeting, lots of people there said, oh, you need to talk to the universities. You need, you know, there's all these people there. I know the dean, this, that, and the other. And I think that now is the time for all of us to use all our influence, think about all the people that we know within those positions and start to have one-to-one conversations with them and try and find ways to, you know, to get them to be bolder, actually, is what we need to happen. And then the other thing that we should do is we should work with student unions. We should get student unions making a right big bloody fuss about this, okay? Because, you know, again, it's those young people missing out.
Thank you, Julie. I'm aware of the time. I do want to get a couple or one more question in at least. I'm sorry we haven't had much time for questions, but it's been such a passionate, fiery debate. I want to thank everybody now before you leave, but let's have Susie Corto. Are you still here? Susie, please ask your question. Welsh Labour did well with their response to COVID. Now with education, could this persuade Labour MPs in England to actually join the campaign? We've kind of answered that question a bit, but did anyone want to say any more on that subject? It's been quite Welsh heavy recently, maybe you could say. I'm going to go on to the next question then, if that's okay. Colin Gordon, do you want to ask that question, Colin? Your question live? Fire away, Colin.
Okay, this is probably a fairly bit of a no-brainer and fairly obvious thing, but maybe not to be forgotten. There's obviously a lot of support for the cause in the both houses of Parliament. Are we thinking about going the same way as the excellent work on COVID and the Trade Commission, having an all-party, cross-party parliamentary group to work with us on this?
Who wants to take that one? Geraint?
No.
No.
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Tamsin.
Oh, so Colin has said this seems a natural cause for an all-party, cross-party parliamentary group, following the great recent examples of the COVID and trade groups. Oh, this is for Andrew, who's not here. Are we looking at this? Do we have MPs already engaged? Oh, Richard Wilson is going to answer this question, it says here.
Tamsin, can I say something there?
Oh, yes, Anna, Richard can come in after.
Okay, there is an APPG for Erasmus, and my MP in Coventry, Taiwo Owatemi, is actually the chair of it. And I'm sort of in contact with Taiwo. I met with her and another Labour MP in Coventry, one just before Christmas, just before we knew the outcome, and Taiwo just after Christmas when we did know what was happening with Erasmus. And I haven't had any updates from her recently, but both she and Zara Sultana are extremely supportive. And as I say, I've been working with them sort of quite closely with all of our sort of language and Erasmus work in Coventry.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. That's brilliant, really helpful. Did you want to put some details in the chat possibly for that? Maybe. I'm just going to, did someone else want to say something on that subject? Oh, well, Richard, please.
Richard.
No, I've just popped up to say I can't answer the question. I was just indicating in the chat box that it is a question that was going to be answered live, but not by me.
Sorry, Richard.
And I'm going to quickly add from the side of Yemen and our work as a campaign group again. This is one of the many tasks that I didn't mention before. If there is people here that like to speak to politicians, it can be quite fun, also challenging, but also quite fun. And that like emailing them and following up and maybe having meetings with their assistants and then trying to get through to the real one and so on. It's really, I've done this before. is really quite a rewarding and actually quite a a learning curve exercise as well, then this is something else. Another reason why to sign up with to volunteer with us as the coalition, because in the end, the proposal that Colin put forward would be a great achievement. Why? Because we would get public visibility and we would get the topic up in Parliament, which is kind of step by step towards perhaps rejoining it. So it's a great idea, and thank you for bringing it up, Colin.
Great, thank you very much, Julius. Very helpful as well. Julie.
Yeah, maybe if I could just add that I think it's great what Julius is doing, and I would encourage lots of people to get involved and do that. And having been a politician, in fact, I know that it is the assistants and the policy advisors, working for the MPs who are the really key people that you need to make relationships with. So thank you for doing that, Julius. It's really important work. I'm working with a similar campaign called Our Shared World, which is a coalition of 100 NGOs who are trying to shift the government's policy on education. And we're doing some really interesting things, looking at which MPs from all the different parties will be warm to our overtures to try and change education policy. And I suspect that many of the people who are on our Excel spreadsheet list for Our Shared World will be exactly the same kind of people who will be open and warm to the Erasmus Plus ask as well. So I think there could be some alignment between the Our Shared World campaign, which began as an Oxfam education campaign, but we've been thinking about who are other campaigns and movements who might be aligned with some of the things that we're working on. And I've already mentioned your name and Sil to them, Andrew. I think it would be really important for you to come on board with that. So, once we've made some progress on that, I hope that we can share the information that we've got, which could be used by this network, this alliance.
Thank you, Julie. Is it worth putting something in the chat about that? There's still just a bit of time. Our Shared World, we have. Yeah. I think it's time we draw to a close. Yes. We are an hour and a half in. I'd like to carry on, but I think we have to draw to a close. I'm very, very grateful to our guests, speakers today, to Andrew Adonis, to Anna Grainger, to Andrew Hadley, to Geraint, who stepped in at the last minute. Thank you very much to Julie Ward, to Julius for co-hosting, and to Nathan and Nadia. I think Nadia is no longer with us. Very, very passionate and articulate speeches there. I'd like to draw your attention to the other webinar. As I say, it's not hosted by GfE, that one, but it's with Sil and my company, Actors of Dionysus, and that's on the 14th of July. I think I put the details in the chat. Thank you to Grassroots for Europe again for supporting our Erasmus Plus campaign, and also to Best for Britain, and to you all for tuning in and listening. And see you all. I don't know when the next one is, Richard. Is there something you want to say?
We'll have a regular Road to Rejoin open forum next Wednesday, so all welcome, just to talk about your ideas and things like that. I would just finally encourage you to support Tamsin's group. She's put her email in the chat box, tamsin@grassrootsforeurope.org, because to me this is a fantastic example of collaboration between Grassroots for Europe and lots of other organisations. It's exactly the sort of thing we want to be doing. And another example I just want to throw in is the twinning project. We had a meeting about that last week, the Twinning Working Party, talking about reviving twinning programs between UK towns and cities and European towns and cities, and we're working with the European movement on that in a joint effort, and we're still very open to other people who are interested in that and doing something in their own local communities, and learning from we've got some very advanced people in the Working Party, but also some people who are wanting to start from very low level. So please, if you want to get involved in that, email me, richard@grassrootsforeurope.org. I'm not sure when the next webinar is, but hopefully see a lot of you next week at the open forum. So thanks a lot.